So, where do we go from here? I'm Carla McLaren, and this is episode 16, season 2 of the Off Ramp Project. And we have covered some ground. We have covered a lot of ground in the 2 seasons. We've looked at how our emotions and empathy and attention have been for sale for a long time. And they don't even go to the highest bidder. A lot of times they go to the most simple-minded ideas or strange ideas that are pushed at us in such a way that we can't turn away. Not understanding our emotions, which I have to say, most of us don't because we weren't taught to. We were taught that alleged rationality and alleged logic are better than emotions. And it turns out that's not true. It's not how the brain works. It's not how emotions work. It's not how life works. Emotions and logic and rationality, they're all a part of the same thing. They're not separable. They're all a part of something called cognition. But most of us have been taught that there's positive emotions and negative emotions, and you always want the positive ones. And if you're in a negative one, you want to quickly get to the positive ones. The problem with that is there's no such thing as a negative emotion. But if you're taught that, you're going to want to avoid all of those emotions that are in the negative category. And sadly, those are the emotions that are easiest to manipulate in you because you don't have skills in them. Why would you have skills in emotions that are called negative? And I can also manipulate you, or anybody can, into the positive emotions because it's where you want to stay. If you've heard the positive and negative emotions myths, you're going to want to stay in the positive ones, right? Happiness, contentment, and joy. That's 3 emotions out of 17. That's not good math. The math isn't mathing. So I can promise you happiness, contentment, and joy for free. The only thing you have to trade me is your empathy, your emotions, your attention, and your soul. So how about we don't? So I can grab you with your panic. I can grab you with your jealousy and envy. I can grab you with your anger and your rage. I can grab you by using shame on you, right? If you have no skills in these emotions, then you're a sitting duck. And most of us are sitting ducks. I It would be nice to think that you could control your emotions with your amazing logical brain, as if that was even a thing. You can't. Your emotions are older and smarter and faster and more powerful than your little logical brain. So they're always going to win. And instead of making it a fight where someone has to win or lose, we use the logical brain in my work, dynamic emotional integration, to turn toward the emotions, to learn how to speak their language, to learn to listen to them, and to learn to work with them brilliantly because they are brilliant. Your logical brain is brilliant. There should be no fight. But because there is a fight, because we're taught a lot of strange things about emotions, and there's a huge research gap between what neuroscientists and others know about emotions now and what we still know in the everyday world, we tend to be without tools. When someone comes at us and says, "Can you believe these people are doing right?" And they just throw a lot of emotion at you, and you're like, "What? I'm angry. What? That should never be a thing, right? Now I'm going to join a group about that never being a thing." It's very easy to be manipulated if you don't have your hands on your emotions, if you don't understand them, if you don't know how to work with them. It's very easy to be manipulated, and we all have been, and we continue to be. So where do we go from here? I'm looking at my title list for the emotions. So we've looked at cultic mechanisms of control in season 1, episodes 3 through 6. We looked at our emotions being for sale, our empathy being for sale. I've talked about stress, hatred, panic, shame, depression, contempt. In terms of how can you own these emotions rather than being owned by other people who are trying to work these emotions in you. I have a saying, which is if you don't know how to work your own emotions, someone else is going to work them for you, right? And it happens every day. So grabbing back the reins, the ownership of your emotions, especially the strong ones that people like to hook into so they can get your attention, so they can make money off of your eyeballs and your time, right? Learning to work with those emotions: shame, rage, panic, anger, jealousy, envy, anxiety, fear, so many emotions, sadness, grief, depression. So many of these emotions, all of the emotions that I listed, would be called negative. That's nonsense, but that's what we've learned. So we don't develop skills, because who would, right? If it's a negative emotion, you just need to get rid of it. You need to suppress it. You need to ignore it. You need to extinguish it. You don't need to understand it. The problem has led us here, where we are so vulnerable to emotional manipulation and therefore empathic manipulation, because empathy is first and foremost an emotional skill. When empathy breaks down, it almost always breaks down in the presence of difference that you don't understand and can't tolerate because you don't understand it. And it breaks down in the presence of an emotion that you don't have a practice for. So if somebody's really depressed and you find yourself losing the ability to be with them, it's important to look at your own capacity to work with depression. Or if somebody is constantly anxious and you cannot manage being around them because they just rile you up for no reason, you and your anxiety need to have a meeting, right? If you avoid people who are in grief or depression or rage or whatever it is, look at the emotions that you can't tolerate in others. It is almost always because you don't have a practice for that emotion. It is not something that you have as a tool or a friend or an ally. It's just an annoyance. So if your emotions can be manipulated and grabbed onto for the use of others, then so can your empathy. And so it's so crucial to learn about your emotions. And I have a book called The Language of Emotions. You can also go to my website, carlamclaren.com, and there's so much stuff there for free. There's so much stuff on YouTube for free, because I don't know about you, but I grew up poor, and don't, you don't forget it. Let's hope you don't forget it. So I want to make sure that if people need information, they can get it to the extent that they can. And also, my books are available in the library or through the library if the library doesn't have it. You don't have to pay me. That would be great, but you don't have to. So if you want to learn about emotions, every emotion has a video on YouTube. Every emotion has a post or more than one post on my website, carlamclaren.com. You can learn to befriend, understand, and love your emotions. They can become your greatest allies and your greatest areas of access into the deep intelligence inside you. They are brilliant, they are powerful, and it's why people want to control them, because they would like to have power over you. And you can say no. You can say no. We also talked about a lot of buzzwords that are happening. Patriarchy, fascism, socialism, and cults. And how you can become an off-ramp in all this situation. We looked at power. Excuse me. We looked at hierarchies of human worth. We looked at violence and how to talk to each other. When I was writing the first proposal for Off-Ramp, it was a much different book than it is today. It was going to be the stories of people who left very, very high control groups and cults, and not just sort of like, I didn't like that and they were mean to me and now I want to get out. It's people who were 100% dedicated. They were a part of the structure that did damage to others, and everything that you assume about human nature would have said that they would have stayed forever. And these people got out. The first was Mike Rinder, who was a massive presence in Scientology, and a scary one too. He was one of their enforcers, and he got out. I wanted to talk to him, but sadly he died, I think in January of 2025, before I could interview him. Another was Megan Phelps Roper, who was the granddaughter of the Westboro Baptist Church, and she was out there holding signs at the funerals of American servicemen. This church just did so much damage, and she was their spokesperson on Twitter, and she got out. She was in the family. She was doing PR for them, and she got out. The other is R. Derek Black, now Adrienne Black, who was the great white hope of the white supremacy movement and the Ku Klux Klan in the United States. She was the son. It's hard to talk because there's really a place where he became Adrienne, but even so, she called herself the Klansman's son. And she was the son of, or she still is, of Don Black, who runs Stormfront, which is one of the premier white supremacist websites, very much a power broker in the white supremacist movement in the United States. And Adrienne was going to take over, and so many hopes were placed on her, and she got out, right? And what got her out? I was also going to talk about me. I got kicked out, and Yanya, whose cult came together and disbanded itself because their leader had gone cracker dog. Okay, the leader had gone off the rails, even more than normal for a cult leader. But because Mike died and Trump came in, and I began to see the cultic nature of everything, I thought, I don't want to tell these 5 small stories. I want to look at the larger picture. And one of the things I did was many years ago, I think 2015, I remember asking my friends on Facebook, there's a big Christian evangelical movement going on around Trump, and I don't understand it. He's not a religious person. What is going on? And my dear friend Leo Lincourt said, read Jeff Charlette. And Jeff Charlette has written a number of books, including The Family, which is the secret fundamentalism at the heart of American power, and C Street, the fundamentalist threat to American democracy. These were written before Trump ever came in. There's been a movement since the 1930s to get an evangelical form of, I'm going to say, white American version of Christianity, where Jesus is blonde and blue-eyed, and he loves money, and he's homophobic. Okay, so it's a whole different Jesus than the Jesus I thought we were talking about. But Jeff talks about the genius of the movement to get fundamentalist Christians sort of everywhere, in judgeships, as mayors, in state legislatures, in Congress, in the seat of the president, and it's happened. Project 2025 is a part of that long game, that long plan. And so we've got that to contend with as well. There is also a book by Jessalyn Cook called The Quiet Damage, which is QAnon and the destruction of the American family. And I've told you before that when there are things I don't know or want to remember in a book, I Post-it note it. And this book is so full of Post-it notes because there was so much. It's a rich book, and there's so much here that I didn't know about QAnon. And the absolutely wild ideas that are there, but that people are eating like it's the most delicious breakfast cereal you ever had. And part of it is that people on the left are blood drinking child molesters, and that's what we do for fun, apparently. And that is something that people believe. I told you all that to say this. I've been looking at ways to talk to people. So there's Braver Angels. There's the book High Conflict by Amanda Ripley. There is, I talked about it in episode 15. There is Calling In by Loretta Ross. There's Taking the War Out of Our Words by Sharon Ellison. There is I Never Thought of It That Way by Monica Guzman. And all of it is about creating a situation in which people can speak their truth and begin to hear each other instead of just people pointing their fingers at each other and fighting. But I went to a Braver Angels last weekend, and the topic was something about Trump derangement syndrome, which as soon as I saw that, I went, wow, that is irresponsible. That is a terrible frame, and you don't want to support that frame because that's a cultic mechanism of control to say that anybody who disagrees with Trump must be having a syndrome of derangement, which means that they're insane. So you can't have a normal person's ability to look at Donald John Trump and say, that's not okay. You are put in the category of insanity. You're a fool. And you're not in control of yourself or your thinking or your emotions. It's a terrible frame, but it is beautiful if you want to have a cult, right? And so I went and said that because everybody gets to speak whatever they want to speak. And they didn't understand me. It went like, here's the point and they're over there. They couldn't hear it. And I felt like I was speaking pretty clearly, but within the context of the Braver Angels way of being, everybody's opinion is equally as valid as anybody else's, except mine, because I was talking about something very serious. And they really didn't have the mechanism to manage it. And someone on the left came on and said that no, here's proof that they had Trump derangement syndrome because they had actually wanted to take money and put it all together for someone to assassinate the president. And I thought, wow, you got weaponized. I wonder I'm thinking this in my mind. I wonder what happened and what kind of mechanisms of control got you, a person on the left, just a regular everyday person, to actually want to murder someone, do a political murder. Like, what happened to you? I was fascinated. But then the person went on to say, but all of my leftist friends have TDS. Now it's got an acronym, Trump derangement syndrome, right? And then because all of her friends on the left were upset with Trump in the same way that she used to be. And that means that they are as deranged as she was. And I thought, wow, what a loss of the opportunity to understand what happened to her when she was weaponized, right? And what a loss of empathy and compassion for her to look at people who were weaponized in a similar way that she was and think of them as the other and as deranged people and as broken, instead of, like, she could say, I broke through this and here's what happened to me. She could be a mentor and a role model for these people. And instead, she's cult hopping, right? Because she didn't understand the mechanisms through which she became weaponized. She then weaponized her new non-Trump, non-derangement, non-syndrome self by turning on them. So in a way, it felt like growth to her. And I just sat, and a lot of times when I come out of Braver Angels, I feel better about the world. And this time I felt so much worse because there needed to be some intervention there. And there wasn't, because of the way that things were set up. And I think that by speaking that out loud and not having anybody question it, it helped to cement it more into her psyche in such a way that it would make it harder for her to understand what all of her friends and herself had gone through. And it would make it harder for her to become a leader and a mentor and a support and a compassionate ear for her friends. And I think one of the things that people missed is how much our media is intentionally manipulating us and how much intentional chaos is being thrown at us. So we will be off guard, we will be off balance, we will be off our feed, and we will be easy targets for anybody who wants to grab our attention. So there's a way that Braver Angels is helpful, and other things like that. And there's a way that it's not. I went back to Quiet Damage, and Jessalyn was talking about families where some people were trying to logic their loved one out of QAnon, and that didn't work. You don't want to logic someone out, but you generally have to love them out and care about them out and compassion them out and empathy them out. And it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of skill. This is what happened for Adrienne Black. People at New College, where she was, I think she was studying history, knew who she was and chose to invite her to meals and invite her into their community so that they could create a compassionate and empathic off-ramp so that they could talk openly once they had established trust, asking sort of Socratic questions. And Socratic questions are questions that are open-ended, and they ask you about your interest in the thing. So let's say that you thought that all leftists were lizard people from another planet, that is one of the beliefs. You could ask questions about that if you could calm yourself down enough, right? And slowly help the person begin to ask their own questions. At the end of a Socratic dialogue, the person that you've been speaking to makes up their own mind because you haven't been logicking them and you haven't been pushing them and you haven't been trying to manipulate them into your point of view, right? It takes skill and it takes patience and it takes big empathy. It's emotional labor, it's empathic labor. It's worth it and it's hard. Megan Phelps Roper met people on Twitter who treated her as an intelligent, worthwhile person instead of just screaming swear words at her. And they too got her involved in a Socratic dialogue and just kept asking her and leaning into her intelligence rather than saying, how can you believe those things? They're absurd. Nobody believes things that are absurd to them, y'all. Nobody believes things that they think are crazy. It makes sense to them at some level. And that's where you can engage. And then Mike Rinder, he actually left his children in Scientology. They were forbidden to speak to him. And I think they didn't speak to him before he died. So they've missed out, but within that belief system, they've been protected from what they call a suppressive person who would kind of ruin their connection to Scientology and therefore to eternal life. So that's where they went with that. So as I look at off-ramp, yes, things like Braver Angels, and I never thought of that, and calling in are going to be in there, but also there needs to be more than that when there's so much intentional manipulation and intentional chaos and intentional emotional tweaking and intentional empathic uh, interference happening. It's not just you and I are having a difference of opinion about whether Trump derangement syndrome is a thing. It's that the way that you got it was in and of itself abusive. And I don't want to lean any more into that and have an argument about whether it's real or it's not, but rather start to ask you, what is important about that to you? What speaks to you about that? Because it concerns me. Yeah. So we're facing so much. We're facing so much in so many areas that the off ramp is going to be a multiple off ramp. You can go to Hawaii, you can go to Italy, you can go to in the same off ramp. Also, there's magic, so I think there might be. It's a time machine as well. You can go to the middle of the Sahara, but hopefully in the nighttime, so you don't get too hot. You can go to a redwood forest at dawn. You can go to all different beautiful places. Each one of us will have our own different off ramp we want to take. But my hope is that where we end up is in ownership of our emotions, ownership of our empathy, ownership of our humanity, that we are no longer weaponized against each other, that we are no longer being manipulated by chaos or emotional intensity, that we can reclaim our emotions, that we no longer need to put people in hierarchies of human worth, which damages empathy all throughout the system, that we understand cultic mechanisms of control, which are simply abuse. They are abusive relationships, and it's always important to understand those. Gavin de Becker, who wrote The Gift of Fear, which I talked about. When did I talk about that? Probably in episode 11 of season 1, Retrieving Your Panic. He said that one of the ways you can tell that someone's not a good person is very simple, is they don't accept your no. So salespeople just went, what? That if someone says, do you want to have a drink with me? And you say, oh, no, thanks. They said, no, come on. You want to have a drink with me. And you're like, no, I'm not drinking tonight. And now you're having to explain yourself, right? Oh, come on. Don't be like that. Don't be like that. I just want to relax and get to know you. And let's just have a drink, right? That person is not a good person. They don't have your best interest at heart. Maybe they're a good person in other ways, but they don't have your best interest at heart. If someone doesn't listen to your no, that's a signal. That's a very quick signal. And in the episodes 3 through 6, where we look at the cultic mechanisms of control, I give you ways to understand what those look like. I give you bullet points and also ways to understand what would it look like if it was good. So if someone said, would you like a drink? And I say, no, I'm not drinking tonight. Then you can say, well, I'd like to talk to you. Do you have time? Would you want to just sit with me? Right? That's a person who listens to the no and still tells you what's true and gives you an option. And you can still say, thank you very much, but I'm tired. And I think I just need to go home tonight. And he says, well, it was good to meet you. And if I see you here again, I hope we can say hello, right? The person isn't going further. They're not trying to get your number. They're not trying to do any kind of manipulation. They're disappointed. That's clear, but not so disappointed as to make it your problem. Yeah. And I think if that person had said something to me about maybe next time, I said, well, give me your number or something like that, I would have a choice. I might not do that, but it depends on how funny they are. But there's ways to be with people and understand people so that you're not surprised when abuse starts to happen, right? Because you can see it right away. They don't accept your no, or they try to manipulate you. They try to influence you. They try to make an us versus them, where those people are bad and we're the good people. You don't want to talk to your family because they don't want us to be together, right? You can begin to understand what cultic mechanisms are. And I think that's what happened to me in that Braver Angels meeting when the woman talked about, having Trump derangement syndrome. I was like, wow, you called it that, but it is something entirely different. You got cultic. you got involved in a cultic mechanism of control, and you became a fully weaponized and deployable agent of whatever cultic group that was. Remember, it doesn't have to be a cult. It can be cultic. It needs to have all four of Janja Lalich's aspects of cultic control to be an actual cult, with a trademark. But you can have cultic mechanisms in any relationship, which is why it's so important to know what they are. So if you fall into one, because sometimes it's the only thing we've ever seen, you can grab onto that and fix it. We wrote a shorter book called Escaping Utopia, and it's about 65 children who left cults on their own. And the chapters talk about the cultic mechanisms of control, how to notice them, how to identify them, and how to find better ways to do what a cult is trying to do in an abusive way. So where do we go from here? I think it's facing the mountain of trouble that we are faced with now, but not being Sisyphus. If you remember, Sisyphus is the man from the Greek story, and he's pushing a rock up a hill. And then he gets to the top of the hill and the rock falls back down. So he goes back and he pushes it up again. That's his life. I think he was cursed. I think that was a curse. Well, I don't know what Sisyphus did, but that was the curse. So I think facing the mountain, but not becoming Sisyphus, is maybe you take an off ramp and you go around the mountain, right? And you go around. It takes you a little while, but you eventually get there, and the rocks stay where you put them. Yeah. So this is the final episode of season 2, and I know where I'm going with the book now. Actually, I've got about 10 books here that I could write. Just the book on The Secret Heart of Violence. That would be a great book. It's not the Patri, it's the Archie. That would be a great book. But I'm now winnowing down all of this and seeing, how do we face what's true, which is the incredible cultic atmosphere of this time, where just listening to people is not going to be enough, and logicking them is definitely not going to work. How can you believe that? That's ridiculous. Well, here's how I believe it. I'm shutting off right now because you're not treating me well. How do we create the relationships that we need to be able to get into a Socratic dialogue with someone? How do we talk about cults and abuse and manipulation in such a way that people don't feel like they're dupes, that people don't feel like ashamed of themselves? Cultic mechanisms are powerful. They can take anybody over. It's not like, oh, you're the type of person who would join a cult, or you're the type of person who would be in an abusive job or an abusive love relationship or an abusive friendship. Everybody's that type of person if they don't know how to identify manipulation and abuse and cultic mechanisms of control. So that's the off-ramp project in a nutshell. It's a big nut. There's a lot of different shells. But I know where I'm going now, and wish me luck. Thank you so much for the time you've spent listening to me thinking out loud, and just throwing a whole bunch of books. But for me, books are life, and I'm so lucky to be a writer. So lucky. I work hard, but books are life for me. They are. I breathe books. I eat books. I love them. So thank you so much for supporting my life's work. You make a difference. And I wish you as many beautiful off ramps as are humanly possible for you to build, and for you to make sure that the relationships and the media and the situations and the ideologies that you cling to or are drawn to are worthy of your time, your attention, your emotions, and your empathy. I'm hoping that you have some tools now to make those decisions and extract yourself from situations and relationships and ideologies that do not respect you, because you deserve respect. Thank you. See you soon.